everybody. Welcome back to Eggs, the podcast. Today's special guest is Jon Morris, CEO and founder of Fiscal Advocate. Can you welcome to the show, Jon? How are you?
Good. Great to be here, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thrilled to have you. And thanks so much for making time for us.
Yep.
So you went to the University of Chicago. Can you tell us, about your career since then? Like how you got into it and what do you do?
Absolutely. So when I was at University of Chicago, I entered an annual business plan competition called the New Venture Challenge. I took second place in the competition. I won $10,000, and that became the capital that I used to launch my last business, which was a digital marketing agency called Rise Interactive. I grew it from just me to a little bit under $40 million in revenue in 16 years. Exited that business 4 years ago and pretty much immediately started my current company, Fiscal Advocate, which helps professional service companies manage all their finances. So think of me as your outsourced finance department. But what makes us unique is we built this technology called Engine BI, which takes all of your financial data and helps you make better decisions to spend your money more intelligently, to spend your time more intelligently, and ideally help you scale and grow.
Okay. BI instead of AI. That's a little different these days.
Think of it as business intelligence. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
I even thought about, did we want to do like enginebi.ai? And I was like, you know what? No, we'll keep it .net, which is, the domain name for Engine BI, and, kept it separate. But we thought about that because we will be building AI into the platform at some point.
Love it.
Yeah, it's funny. We have discussions about this all the time, which is what to do with AI, right? Because there's this rash of everybody adding AI to their apps. And so they just start kind of bolting on AI functionality, And so I actually appreciate that you stuck with business intelligence versus something like AI, because at least in my perspective, I'm a big advocate for AI can be the technology in the background, but we don't need to pitch it like it's a gimmick all the time. And that's
couldn't agree with you more, by the way.
It makes me nuts. Like I'm a CMO on a tech startup right now, and we're building a piece of software that's going to have a lot of heavy AI integration. And this has been my argument from the jump. I was like, man, we cannot just shout AI from the roofs. AI doesn't mean anything to anybody. It's like, it sounds like robots taking over the world, but it's not like a feature. Like, I don't think people are buying this because it has AI.
I think it is. Everyone's asking like, what's your AI strategy? No one's asking like, what's your HTML strategy?
Yeah.
And I think what people need to think about is, what problem are you trying to solve? What tools do you need to solve that problem? And is AI one of those solutions to help you solve it?
Yeah.
And I think that if they are problem focused as opposed to, I got to use AI in some way, shape, or form, I think you'll get better products, better solutions, better services for your customers.
Yeah, I think you're right. And if you have, if you experiment with any of these other softwares that have the AI, or many of them, they, it's almost always just kind of doing something that's not that important. It's like, okay, well, we can do this thing, or we can, maybe we can make you write faster. We can write a paragraph for you instead of you doing it. But it's like, I don't know, kind of like, it's not that big a deal. So to your point, having a focus for what it is you're trying to do or trying to solve a goal. I mean, the technology is amazing, but if it's not doing anything all that useful, then it's not important.
Yeah. So I wasn't trying to derail the conversation there. I just
well, that's okay. I'm always happy to find someone that thinks like I do. Jon, let's continue down that conversation of sort of how you got started, but let's talk about sort of your entrepreneurial journey a little bit. A lot of the people who listen to this show are CEOs, startup founders, people thinking about starting something. And so sometimes we like to spend a little bit more time going through like the depth of somebody's experience in spinning up a company. You have unique experience in that you've built a company and exited. So there might be some interesting learnings to talk about in that first company. And then, or if you want to maybe focus your energy on the development of this company, maybe what you learned in the prior and how that dovetailed into this, that might be a good place to start.
Happy to go in either way. The first thing I would say is, if you look at my last company, I was a CEO from 0 in revenue to 37 million in revenue. And what you'll learn as you go along this journey is that the way you run a business is very different at different sizes and scales of the company. And I look at it as there's 4 kind of stages of a CEO. So the first one is a startup CEO. Between 0 and 25 employees, you are the founder is really leading everything. They make all the decisions. They know who everybody is. They know all the technology. Like every single thing really revolves around that founder. From 25 to 100, you really start building your first leadership team, and you have to start delegating and trusting leaders to make decisions from there. From 100 to 250, which was right around when I exited Rise, is you're now building systems for your leaders' leaders, and that generally means that you're starting to build an ecosystem, and the tools that you use, like the tools may be very disparate between 25 and 100. So the sales team uses their tools and the client delivery team uses their tools. Now it's like an ecosystem. You decide to switch your CRM system, that impacts multiple groups. And so you have to start thinking about the systems and the processes. And then over 250, you really transition from being an operating CEO to a strategic CEO. And at this moment in time, you have a leader in every single department of your company. So there's someone running sales, there's someone running marketing, there's someone handling all the client work, and you're more like aiming the ship in terms of what direction you want to go in, but you're less involved in every single component of the business. And so you have to evolve if you're looking to build a large company as a CEO into one of these different roles at each different stage.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I mean, it's kind of interesting to hear your take, especially at the scale of company, right? 250 employees and bigger. Because I've heard something similar at much smaller sizes, right? People start talking about the changes between 0 to 5 people and 5 to 10, and some of the, I guess those early growth things. And so I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about just your experience in that. I mean, obviously you went to college and you came out of school and you started this business, but did you know what to do as a CEO? Did you have mentorship, or did you just kind of fall upwards and work your way through these stages?
Well, so I graduated undergrad from a small school called Kenyon College. And I spent one day moving, and then I started my first digital agency in 1996 at 22 years old. And so that's where I got a crash course on running a company. More on what not to do than what to do. But I surrounded myself by a lot of mentors. It happened to be a very fortunate time period. It was the .com boom. Mm-hmm. And you had all these 22-year-olds that were making crazy amounts of money, and people who normally would not give a 22-year-old the time of day were very interested in talking to younger people and getting involved in their businesses. And I thought it was going to be like, the next great internet startup. And so I started this digital agency, and I surrounded myself with a bunch of people who mentored me and taught me how to run a business better. Where I failed, so there was two things. There was the .com crash, and I lost 80% of my revenue in 1 month in 2000. And, for a long time, I blamed the .com crash. But reality is I didn't manage my finances well, and I didn't have great HR practices. And so when I started Rise Interactive, my last company, I found it right after graduating business school, or while I was in business school through that competition. I was a much more seasoned executive. I was 30 or in my 30s. And, I had the knowledge of my first initiative. But what I would tell people if you're starting out on your entrepreneurial journey is there are a lot of people who have made their careers that if you're good at listening, they're oftentimes looking for things to do. You might find someone semi-retired that can give you guidance and help you grow your business. And in every business, my current business, I have a person named Jim Bauman. He's the chairman of the company. In my last business, I had a series of advisors, but my first and most influential one was a person named Jack Kraft. And he was the CEO and CFO of Leo Burnett before moving on to his next job. And so I had these brilliant people, just to give you an idea, Jim was the CEO of a company called Fiscal Education. I think he took it from 500 million to like 1.2 billion. You know, I mean,
Wow.
he like crushed it. So surrounding yourself by mentors who've been there and done it is really important to help make better decisions so you don't make mistakes.
So do you think, was it your college network that kind of opened those doors to those mentors, or was it your wallet?
So in the first one, it was, I really think, timing. And then there were, you know, like I'll give an example. You know, my mom's cousin through marriage was very high up at a big law firm. And, you know, he asked to meet me, you know, like he wanted to get involved. Because I think it was just this timing that, you know, people were interested at that moment in time. So I wasn't like seeking it out. People sought me out. But after that, I started to network more and I started to meet more and more people, and they introduced me to people. But in this one, same thing. I was talking to someone. They said that I should reach out to Jim. I connected with Jim. I didn't know him prior to starting this business, but I do believe you have to pay these people, whether you pay them in options or you pay them in cash. You know, that if you're asking for their time, then you have to make sure that you compensate them for their time.
100%. Love that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about selling Rise. The process of getting ready to sell, knowing you want to sell. Was it did you see a decline in revenue, or because SEO is kind of one of those things that was really hot for a long time? You got the Rand Fishkins of the world, and you got that kind of stuff. And then I think it's kind of trended off a little bit as of late. Was that part of the reason why you decided to pivot and go in a different route, or was the all the dots aligned of just now's the time?
A couple of things. Rise was on the Inc. 500, 5,000 list for 9 years consecutively. Every single year I ran the business, we had double-digit or triple-digit growth. And we were always adding on services. So we started with search marketing. We added programmatic. We added affiliate. We added social. We added web development. We added analytics. You know, like there's a series of services. So it continued to grow very substantially after I left as well. So those were the impetus there. I would say there was 3 major reasons I really looked to sell. The first one is my original exit strategy was I was going to die one day. I had
That's a good exit.
I had zero interest in selling. But I started this business when I was single. I didn't have kids. All of a sudden, I have a wife. I have 3 daughters. And I have this illiquid asset with the vast majority of my wealth within that asset. So diversification became part of my reasoning. The second one was every year, my favorite day of the year is the first business day of the year. I call it game day. And if you think about it, it's the beginning of the season. And I put a lot of time, generally about 6 months worth of preparation into next year and game day. And I put the plan together and all of a sudden it just felt the same. I didn't feel the challenges. I talked about being a strategic CEO. I don't think I like being a strategic CEO. I like being an operating CEO. You know, so you have someone doing your sales, you're doing your marketing, doing the client work, you know, and you're kind of driving the strategy. I like being in the weeds more. So I think I was at a stage where I wasn't enjoying it as much. And then the third one is there was just some things personally going on with my family where I needed to give a little bit more attention to my family. And so I'd say those were the impetus reasons for why I decided to exit.
Okay.
So
that makes
one of the
complete
things
sense.
I'd like to spend a little bit of time on, and I think this is something that for our audience in particular, and even me personally, that I suffer with, which is sort of, I guess, executing on the ideas, right? So we spend a lot of time coming up with ideas and brainstorming, especially for entrepreneurs with exciting visions and things like that. It's really easy to come up with the next big thing, right?
Yeah.
But actually executing on it and turning it into a business is maybe a different skill set. And the reason I want to talk about this in particular with you is, exactly what you demonstrated with Rise, right? You were able to take this as a very small company and grow it into something very big. you were able to go through these different phases of development throughout. But no doubt that included a lot of goal setting and meeting objectives. And
Yep.
I think that that's really maybe for many people, I think there's sort of a disconnect. Most people never own a business as big as what you're talking about. And so there seems to me that there's a clear delineation between, people who execute at a high level and people who maybe, don't execute quite as high. And so I wonder if there's any insights around just sort of goal setting, execution, how do we hold ourselves accountable, those sorts of things that you might have learned along the way.
Absolutely. So first of all, what I love about business is I consider it the greatest strategy game that just never ends. And if you think about it, all we have is time and money. And how I spend my time and money and how you spend your time and money and how anyone else spends their time and money really is going to determine the outcomes of your business. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about, is my time and is my money allocated in the right area? So first thing is I have a saying, it can't be a goal unless you put budget against it. This is actually why Fiscal Advocate exists, is to help people think about how to spend their time and their money more intelligently so that, they can scale and grow and achieve their dreams. So that's one thing. I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, hey, Jon, I really want to grow faster. And I always follow up with the same question. That's awesome. What % of your revenue do you spend on sales and marketing? And I'd say 80% of the time I get the same answer, which is, oh, we don't spend anything on sales and marketing. It's all word of mouth. And so my response is, going back to it can't be a goal unless you put budget against it, is that you're wishing for growth to happen at that moment in time. You're not making growth happen. And so, because if you were, you'd be spending money in sales and marketing. I used to joke around when I owned Rise. I was like, how come I'm the only marketer that believes in marketing? And I'd be spending a lot of money on our marketing department. So that's one thing. The second thing is every single person, myself included, has shiny object syndrome. I happen to be very passionate about soccer. I'd love to own a youth soccer club someday or soccer technical training. I'm just not letting myself do it. I'm focused on this business. I believe in having a long-term horizon. So I have a 20-year time period of creating this company. I'll be really, really old at that point in time. Not that I'm not old now. And so staying focused is one of the things I think is really important. Coming up with annual goals. And I have 4 goals that I want people to come up with. The first one is a revenue goal. The second one is a profit goal. The third one is a cash goal. And I'm going to touch on cash in a second. And then the fourth one is called an infrastructure goal. I believe in this concept of the pursuit of world class. And what I mean by that is I want my business every year to be better than it was at the beginning of the year. And when you think about each of us going out and pitching and selling to somebody, we're making promises of what the experience is going to be like. And then we have to deliver. And I want that experience to be better than it was in the sales pitch. So that means I have to constantly invest in making our service and our product better. But once again, if I want to do that, then I have to budget to make it better. And so I typically want people to come up with a minimum of 4, and I'd say a maximum of 6 investments they want to make in the business. And that could be, I'm going to invest in this new service offering, or I'm going to invest in these new features to make my existing service better, or I'm going to invest in technology that, coincides with my service. But it could also be, I'm going to improve my recruiting process, or I'm going to improve my sales and marketing initiatives. But it's spelled out really well defined. Then what I do is I have people break it up into 90-day goals where there's, laser-like focus on what are you going to do over the next 90 days to make sure that you hit your annual goals.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I'm habitually the guy that doesn't do the sales and marketing, mainly because I'm a solopreneur. Everything
Yep.
kind of in my business revolves around me. I can't really outsource anything. And that is a crutch, and it's not fun because you can only scale so much when you're the only person involved. And right now, the word of mouth kind of keeps me busy enough, which works for me. But it's funny when your comment about being the only person in marketing that actually does marketing.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I used to, I had the yellow page ad, I had all this stuff like that, and now I'm to the point where I can't really even take on any more work. So it's funny to hear that. Yeah.
But let's just use you, Mike, as an example. The first question I always ask people is, what is your goal? Like, you're a solopreneur, and you might say, I love being a solopreneur. I never want to be bigger than just me. Managing people is hard, and not everyone enjoys managing people.
So
yeah.
the thing with me is I work in the service business, and I'm working in people's weddings, and it's a big deal. It's they spend a lot of money at their wedding. They expect certain things, and I've done the multi-op system where I've had people and I sent them out to do these weddings and perform at them and stuff like that. And they were more of a detriment to me than a benefit. By the time I paid them and replaced the equipment they broke, and then the reputation they ruined, it just wasn't worth it to take on the extra overhead in that business. I'm kind of I'm working on another one right now that can scale a lot better, that doesn't involve me, and that's the exit route, because I can't be 80 years old DJing a wedding.
Yeah.
And so I gotta start making plans, but it's that's always been my crutch, is because my level of what I expect out of people, no one ever lives up to me, and so I took them out of the equation.
And here's what I would say is, first thing I always ask people is, do you want to be an entrepreneur, or do you want to be a person who DJs weddings? Because
both.
but saying, like, the reality is, when you're in the service-based business, at some point you no longer get to do the digital marketing.
Yeah.
So I started out at Rise, where I was doing the paid search campaigns, and I'm putting the reports together, and I'm writing their keywords and restructuring their URLs for SEO and all that stuff. And then I hired someone, and I had them work on doing the client work. And by the way, they weren't as good as me in terms of that work initially. Hiring is really hard. I don't know if you guys are sports guys at all, but I'll just use the Chicago Bears as an example. They're on like their 30th quarterback in 5 years.
Bears.
And if you just look at the amount of time they spend in recruiting and the amount of money they spend on these positions, and they still can't get it right.
Yeah.
Recruiting's hard. And I always tell people is, no matter how much you try to reduce the risk, until you start working with someone, you don't know if they're going to break equipment and they're going to suck. And so it takes a lot of time to figure out, well, why did I make the wrong hire? What do I need to do better the next time? And, eventually you get better. In 2006, in my last agency, I fired 50% of the people I hired. We were between 5 and 10 employees. Everyone thought I was nuts. So it's like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I know that I need my top 10 people, my first 10 people, to be absolutely amazing. They have to be A players. And I wasn't going to, lower my standard if I made a bad hire. I was going to get rid of the person and then go get the next hire. And which put a lot of stress on the whole team, because, like, oh, great, I got a new person to help me. And then we let that person go 30 days later. And
once they figured it out, or started to.
Yeah. And so, but like, I'll just use my soccer club as an example. I love actually coaching soccer. I don't know if I want to run a soccer club as opposed to being probably a coach within a soccer club. And so when I think about that, I recognize, like, if you want to build a big company, what you sell is the service that you might love at one point, but you don't get to do it anymore. You now have a team of people who do that.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, no, I get that. And it is a real challenge. I mean, in this tech startup I'm working with, I mean, we have a really small team, and just like getting the right people in place and all that has been a real struggle. The other problem is that, I mean, we're a young team. We were all brought together through the CEO for various reasons. We all have different skill
Yeah.
sets and things like that, but none of us are actually professionals at what he hired us to do. So
Hmm.
we all have this really steep learning curve. He believes in us, and our ability, just in having worked with us in all these different ways. But we're now trying to, specifically for me, I'm working in kind of a product management role for him. And we're trying to build the software product and all this stuff, but I've never been a product manager, like this is a whole new world for me.
Yep.
So I'm running, and now granted I ran or still run a marketing company. I guess we're more on the design side than marketing, but we do, I've worked with contractors, I work with developers, we build websites, we do all these things. So I do a lot of the same activities that a product manager might. But now I'm in a role where I have to manage his team and his people and try and, and
Yeah.
it's proving to be very challenging for me, even though I felt really comfortable in my main gig.
Yeah.
Doing it for him has been a different thing. So it's a challenge for sure to get the right people in place. And we're actually moving a bunch of people around right now for that very reason. So
Yeah.
to kind of move on, let's talk a little bit about just sort of differentiation, like trying to stand out in a crowd. So one of the things, especially, and this might be something you have specific expertise around, which is, in that period of time that you were talking about when Rise was, I guess, on the rise, there were a lot of digital marketing companies popping up, and a lot of people can sell SEO, or a lot of people can sell, email campaigns or whatever other service you were talking about. So what did you guys do in particular that you thought was different? One thing you kind of talked to before was this focus on being world class and sort of
Yep.
continually investing in making a better product. I mean, yes, these two companies do SEO, but ours is better for X, Y, and Z reason.
Yep.
So I mean, how did you, in an already crowded marketplace, find differentiation such that you could actually grow to be as big as you were?
So a couple of things. I started this in 2004, and it was a lot less crowded than it is today. And my background is, I went to University of Chicago. I got a degree in finance and entrepreneurship, but I'm a numbers guy. And what is so great about digital marketing is how measurable everything is. And we were, before really anybody was focused on data-driven marketing in digital marketing, we were probably one of the pioneers in that area. And so our reporting and our insights were just so far superior to anyone else in the marketplace at that moment in time. Our vision, which is a very long vision, was to help brands leverage their data to make smarter marketing decisions. It's just a lot of words to say we were data-driven. But how did we actually implement that? The first thing is I started to recruit heavily from the finance industry. A lot of the people in 2004 went into marketing or were in marketing because they hated math. They were creatives that didn't want to do math, but all of a sudden math became really important. So we started recruiting from the finance industry, where you had people who were great at math and great at Excel and great at spreadsheets, and we trained them to be great digital marketers. And so that was one big thing that we did different. The second thing is, over time, we spent 8 figures on this, is a analytics platform that would take data from all sorts of different media sources and was able to identify waste in media faster than anybody and redeploy it to more scalable areas. And so this is a good example of, we had a different focus of recruiting, of who we wanted to go after. We created an analytics exam that you had to pass at a 22% pass rate in order for it to even just interview with us. So we had these highly analytical people. And then we built this analytics platform that nobody else had. And so the combination of those two things gave us a massive differentiator that made it very hard for others to compete with.
Yeah, data does it all. I mean, if you can read the tea leaves in the data, that's your roadmap right there.
Well, and it's funny, to your point too, John, like in that era too, this is the generation, at least on the digital marketing side or on the, ad agency side, where everybody was hiring up 14-year-old kids to run Twitter and stuff like
Yeah.
that because they knew how to do it and we didn't, and all that stuff. But to your point, it wasn't very data driven. It was just, oh, well, this kid knows how to run the platform. He can do it.
Yeah.
And that was, it didn't take long before they started to realize that wasn't a great strategy. But I mean, there were a lot of companies that did some version of that. And then as data became more available, even the platforms themselves, started to be more forthcoming with the data they would provide. Immediately they could start assigning metrics and coming up with things that were meaningful versus just, the number of likes they got or whatever. So, vanity stuff. So I think that your point about data is well taken, just in that, especially in those early days, it was hard to get to. And I think even now, I still think a lot of people have sort of a tenuous grasp on good data. It's really easy to sort of generate numbers, but like they don't always mean that much, or they don't know what to do with them when they get them.
Yeah. But I'd like to go a little bit deeper on the whole differentiation side, because it's something I've been thinking a lot about recently. So the first thing is I created what I call the 2-question test. First question is super simple. What makes you unique? And you're generally in the service-oriented business are going to get similar answers. We care more. You get to talk to more senior people. We're data-driven. Better customer service. And I don't really care what your answer is, as long as you can answer the second question. That's awesome. I just met with 50 other companies that do exactly what you do, and they say the exact same thing, that, that they're also data-driven. How are you more data-driven than they are? And so if you can answer that second question, you have a real differentiator. If you can't, then you don't. If I just use Fiscal Advocate as an example, we leverage financial data to help professional service companies make better decisions. Now, if somebody says, that they came across other companies that specialize in professional service companies, we've now spent 7 figures on a platform that provides benchmarking data, tells you what your gross margin should be, normalizes where you should put all of your transactions, gives you all sorts of insights. It connects to QuickBooks, so it automates the data getting pulled in. Like, there's all sorts of things that we've done. So we know what we want to do is we want to continually help companies leverage financial data to make better decisions. But then the add-on to that is we also are very focused on only 3 metrics: how much cash you have relative to your monthly overhead, your profit margin, and your year-over-year revenue growth. And so all of our innovations are around just improving those 3 numbers. And so I'm just trying to give you an idea. Now, what I've noticed is when I do this exercise is people are very good at answering the first question, have a really hard time answering the second question, and then they kind of get stuck of like, well, how do I go and build differentiation? And so there's a few things that I recommend. The first is picking an ideal client profile, or an ICP. So who is the target audience that you're going to go after? The second one is, in my case, it's professional service companies, but, it could be anyone. It could be CPG companies, it could be manufacturers, it could be large companies, small companies. But then it's a matter of really understanding the pain point you're trying to solve for them and what are the unique attributes. And as you start talking to more and more people within that segment, you'll start learning the nuances and the things that make that industry unique. And from there, you can start building a product roadmap of like, here are all the features, here are the services we have to offer, here's what's going to, make us better. And then it's a multi-year journey. Like every quarter and every year, your service or your product offering needs to get better to servicing that differentiation.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. So,
go ahead, Ron.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry, Mike. I'm kind of bogarting this. I'm super interested in this stuff. So sorry. We talked initially about sort of execution. We've now had a little discussion on differentiation. The next thing I want to talk about, which is sort of, I think, maybe a big part of actually each of those prior things, so maybe this should have been the precursor, is actually, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about decision-making in general. So, obviously the tool that you've created helps people with decision-making at a high level. Yeah. And so this is one channel for decision-making. But I guess what I really want to talk about is the active decision making that you've gone throughout building your companies and deciding what you were going to do. Now, in your case, you maybe had some data driven analytics and things like that, but like, you know, why email marketing versus SEO? Why this versus that? Why, you know, and then I guess, you know, I mean, and I understand data could be the short answer, but I think for a lot of people, or what I'm trying to get to the crux of is for a lot of people, I think it's that decision making that actually is where people get stuck, right? So you mentioned your 2 questions, and where people sort of get stuck is that they can't figure out the differentiation. And I think what that is not that they don't have notions for what might make them different, but rather the actual act of decision making or choosing one to go after. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about just, and this sort of dovetails back into goal setting and all that stuff, but in helping somebody pick the thing that they can actually do or make the decision they can actually make that will drive their business forward.
It's a great question. So the first thing is, what metrics are you trying to improve? So I was in a sales pitch about 1.5 years ago. And the guy's like, you know, I'm pretty sophisticated. I look at 315 different KPIs every day. And my feeling is that if you're looking at 315 KPIs every day, you're looking at nothing. I gave you my 3 that I believe you should focus on: how much cash you have relative to your monthly overhead, your profit margin, and your year-over-year revenue growth. So I'm trying to think of the least amount of KPIs to measure. Now, I have one client that is 5 million in revenue and wants to get to 6 million in revenue and never wants to be bigger. I have another client that is 5 million in revenue and wants to be $100 million at some point. And so they want to scale and create a really large company. Neither is a wrong answer. So I think the first decision, you know, I'm really focusing on the leader or the owner of the business, is soul searching. What do they want to do? Like, what are they looking to achieve? Because those avenues are very different based on how you feel and what you want. So the second thing is, you know, I talk a lot about data, and I'm a data guy, but every decision we make is a leap of faith. All data does is reduce that leap of faith. So you still have to make decisions, and sometimes you don't have any data. You know, I'll give an example. I woke up one morning and there's water all over my floor. And I look at the kitchen sink and there's like, I open the cabinets and it's like just spraying water. I don't have any data there. You know, I'm just like sitting there, like turning handles, trying to turn stuff off. I'm screaming at my kids to get my wife. Like, I'm freaking out. Like, there was no data driven decision making. It was all instinct of what I thought needed to happen at that moment in time. And oftentimes that's business, right? You lose a big client or there's some crisis. You got to make a whole bunch of decisions, you know, quickly. What I've learned about decision making, though, is it's hard. And there are some people, I happen to be someone who can make very quick decisions, whether they're good or bad, and I live by those decisions. Some people are very methodical and they need massive amounts of data, massive amounts of time, and then they're ready to make a decision. So, you know, there's different elements of, you know, how people think and what they do about those decisions. But, you know, I'll just give you an example. The worst part of a service-based company is that our inventory are people, and they're people we love and they're people we care about. And you have financial jerks like me that tell you that you need a 50% gross margin, and that, you know, if you're a $5 million company, you only have $2.5 million to service your customers. And if you are spending a lot more than that, we have to figure out how to reduce your cost, which oftentimes means getting rid of these people that you love, and you have to do work. And those are emotional decisions. And, you know, that was one of the things I learned in my first company when I did my deep dive, is there were times I needed to let go of people, but I was scared to do it. And so what I want people to think about is, you know, I always want you to make decisions with your head, but operate with your heart. But you got to be able to make sure that you can make the decisions that are going to put you on a path to the best foot forward. And I'll just give you a few metrics that I look at that I believe are really important. The first one is gross margin. And I'll just give a quick definition. The gross margin is how much money you have left over after all the money you pay to service your customers. So in the world of, the service businesses, if you have 5 million revenue and you hire a bunch of people and you license a bunch of tools and technology to service your clients, and you have a 50% gross margin, that means you have $2.5 million left over. But if you have a 20% gross margin, that means you only have $1 million left over. And so the reason why gross margin is so important is because the higher your gross margin is, the more you can put in your pocket or invest back in your business. The second metric that I believe is really important is what percent of your revenue do you spend on sales and marketing? I don't care if you have $100,000 in revenue, $1 million in revenue, or $5 million in revenue, or whatever the number is, the higher percentage, the more of an advantage you're going to have to someone the exact same size as you. So I constantly think about how can I spend more in sales and marketing to help fuel the growth. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to spend it well, and I'll get into that in a second. The next one is what percent of your revenue do you spend on R&D? 99.9% of the companies I talk to who are in the service space, when I ask them how much they spend on R&D, it is pretty much 0%. They're not thinking about R&D at all. Now, R&D is not just technology. Like when I think of innovation, there's capital I, like Elon Musk building cars that are like self-driving. And then there is what I consider lowercase I. Lowercase I is I'm going to add a new service to my offering, or I'm going to improve the reporting that I deliver to my customers, or I'm going to send them a gift when they sign up. And I believe that from an R&D perspective, you need to be constantly investing in lowercase I innovation. If you can get to uppercase I, that's great, but that's generally not the realm that I'm, like we're dealing with companies that have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or, low seven figures in spend, not, I'm raising a few $1 billion to do something, earth shattering.
Yeah. With your current business Engine BI, I'm sure you had a lot of lowercase i's in the development process of the software to facilitate that. As someone who is in the software world right now and kind of dipping my feet in that area, trying to develop an app, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made to just get to your MVP, just to get the minimum offering that you have, just to be able to create a product. And then after you create the product, what's the next thing? Do I add this widget? Do I add that widget? How do you keep developing the R&D for your product? And with Engine BI, there's got to be so many little nuanced metrics that you're trying to tie into, like, we need to track this data. We need to do this. We need to, all the different things that come into building a platform like yours. Can you maybe talk about developing your MVP and then the actual launch and how things changed in the first year?
Sure. And this is a good example, as Ryan talked about being a product manager. I mean, the ultimate goal of the product manager is to determine what feature is going to provide the greatest ROI to our clients. And so, at the end of the day, your clients want something, whether it's more time, automating a task for them, making them more money. Like the goal is there's some value that is going to be provided. And this is a really good example where a lot of it is instinct based, especially if you're in the startup stage. If you're a massive organization, they probably could do all sorts of different ways of surveying and coming up with data-driven models to prioritize each feature that gets built. But, and sometimes it's trying to make a decision of, am I going to tie my left shoe first, or am I going to tie my right shoe first? Where you have to come up with, these features are of equal and they're both need to be done. So I generally tend to choose the one that will be developed faster first if they're of equal value. But generally, what I did with Engine BI is I launched an alpha. So, I mean, it wasn't really ready for prime time. And I reduced my rate dramatically. So it was practically next to nothing to license the tool. And I got about, 20 to 30 customers really quickly that were willing to pay next to nothing. They still had to pay something in order for me to learn from them. And then from there, I really, just by talking to a lot of them, figured out like what's the next set of features that is most important. And we create a list and we're like, okay, these are like the 6 things we need to go to get from alpha into beta. Then from there, after learning, talking to customers again, what's the next set of lists to go from beta into what I'll say full launch? We launched the software in March of 2023. So, we're only a year and a half into, this journey. And, and we've made it past beta. So we're now at full launch. But I can tell you, like, I have a 5-year priority list of things I want to build. Like the list gets longer and longer. And so it's hard, it's like we're doing the best we can by just listening to customers. That's our data set, is just talking to customers about what they need.
Yeah, their feedback is critical in
Yep.
any world, whether you're doing landscaping. Actually listening to your customer and getting their feedback is the only way to grow. And if you can keep them happy and deliver what's important to them, word of mouth.
You're gonna exactly. You'll once again make sure that the promise keeper is doing a better job than the promise maker.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the issue that we're running into, or an issue we're running into in our software project that we're building, is trying to actually understand what is the base set of things they need to be able to do, or a customer should be able to do inside the application. And they're not directly correlated with what might be the thing that has the best ROI. So I can't go super deep into it, but this is a product for escrow workers, people who work in the escrow industry.
Okay.
And one of the things that, so that might be the most valuable, let's say, might be insight into business analytics and actual, tools for the owner to actually have transparency inside their company, something they don't see. But for the people who are actually using it, they don't need to know any of that stuff. They actually need to be able to process an escrow transaction. So we've got sort of features that are necessary in order for them to do the work. And then there's the needs of the person who actually makes the purchasing decision that, makes it more valuable to them, or actually would return the ROI, because, theoretically they already have a way of doing escrow transactions. So, so anyway, so that's like one of the dichotomies that we're running into is, trying to establish what is enough feature set that they can do their job, but what gives them enough of, these other items that are the ROI return for the, new buyer, that sort of thing.
And one of the things you might want to do in that scenario is you have 3 different stakeholders, it sounds like. Pick one stakeholder as a starting point and just say, we're going to build for that stakeholder. And the second thing is, have you guys ever heard of the term MVR, moment of value realized?
No, it's a new one.
So in the world of SaaS, if somebody signs up for a year and you break that up into 3 time periods, the first 100 days, the last 100 days, and the 165 days in the middle. In terms of your renewal rate, the first 100 days is by far the most important. Think of it as that's when you build your goodwill bucket. So if you suck at onboarding, but then you crush the last 100 days, it's almost too late. They've already badmouthed you to 100 different people and they're pissed off. But if you crush the onboarding and you build this huge goodwill bucket, and then you start making some mistakes, they're like, oh, you know what? You just made one mistake. It's not that big of a deal. So you build a lot of trust within that area. MVR is the idea of this moment the value is realized. And what we want to do is think about what is that one thing where, let's just take the initial stakeholder, the one who buys from you, is going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. And how do you get to that moment as fast as possible? And the faster you can make that happen, the faster you'll get adoption to your product. And so
I love that.
I spent a lot of time. There's a great book on product-led onboarding, which is where I got a lot of this insight.
Yeah, I'll have to ping you and get that book because that sounds amazing. And I love that because those are the kind of metrics. I mean, I basically came into what was an existing development team. They already have a legacy product, a much older piece of software, something that's 10, 12 years old. That's sort of the bread and butter, keeps the lights on while we're working on this new project. But because of that, they have either old and antiquated processes or lack of process entirely. And being that I don't come from like a product world, I'm trying to impose new processes. They don't totally understand the process. You know what I mean? So like I'm trying to do things that can make our team better in the short form, because we've got a team of fairly green product managers, but I'm trying to impose things that I think could be, useful. And it sounds funny when I talk about some of them, like at the first of the year, we'll introduce the notion of OKRs, but it's like, but I mean, it's a very common thing in business, and a lot of companies have these kind of metrics and stuff, but this one doesn't, and I never really used them in my business because kind of like Mike, my business was sort of built around me as a sole provider. And so it wasn't that important that I measured those kinds of things. Right. And so, but now that I'm doing this on a professional level for a company that already exists and things like that, we're having to take them and in hopes of growing this into something that's meaningful and big and, all that kind of stuff. So I'm having to do a lot of learning. And so the more of these resources I can find, the better I'll be.
You might want to look at the Pragmatic Institute. Pragmatic Institute does training for product managers. I also, as I talked about, I'm a big fan of getting a mentor. So it's like if you can get a seasoned technologist or a seasoned product manager that can really help like map out your sprint cycles and help you get things set up. It's hard to develop the systems for yourself for the first time, as opposed to having someone giving you the roadmap of what to do.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, we want to rebrand the company," I'd have lots of ideas.
Yeah.
When somebody says, "Hey, we need to get this, green product management team developing a world-class piece of software and quick," it's like, okay, well, I don't have like experience to push off of on these, so it's made it a little bit more challenging. Yeah. So, one quick thing I wanted to just get into here in the closing minutes is you've mentioned a couple times the importance of just, percentage of time or money spent on sales and marketing. I think it's obviously one of the things that most companies overlook. Even in my own business, which was a design marketing shop, we too didn't do any of that. We did all the, word of mouth stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think is the sweet spot? And I understand there's going to be variability for everybody, but I mean, do you have a rule of thumb for like what people should be spending on this?
The average is 8% of your revenue should go to sales and marketing. That's the average. So if you think about 100 agencies, 50 are spending less than that, 50 are spending more approximately. If you want to grow faster, you got to spend more than 8% of your revenue on sales and marketing. The idea is about competitive advantage. And how do you get a competitive advantage relative to your competition? And the more that you can spend in sales and marketing relative to your competition, the faster you grow. Now, let's just say you're a $1 million business, and I suggest that you spend $80,000 and you spend $120,000. Comparing that to a $10 million company that spends 6% of their revenue, you're still spending less. They're spending 600, you're spending 120. But if you're comparing yourselves to other $1 million businesses, assuming you spend that money intelligently, you're going to have an edge. And by the way, you're not always going to spend that money intelligently. One of the things I always tell people about sales and marketing is until you spend the money, you don't know if it's going to be well spent. It's kind of like until you hire somebody and start working with them, you don't know if they're a good hire. And so you got to get smarter and learn from what you've tested and keep on growing from there.
I love that you phrased it that way, spend the money intelligently, because my next question was going to be, you say you have an $80,000 budget, but you still used Yellow Pages and radio. It's just not going to work out for you. And coming from someone in the radio world, that's hard to say, but it's true. I don't think there's much return on radio ads unless it's consistent, and in a major market, in a Southeast Idaho market, is not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, if you're spending in the wrong areas, it's not going to do much for you. And then I guess, is there a cause and effect in a way to actually track that that spend to see if it actually works in an efficient manner? How would you go about tracking that data to make sure that you're spending?
So I'll
smart?
start in the least scientific method possible. Just look back at the last 12 months and see how many new customers you win a month and how big are those customers. Then go track after you spend money on whatever you're testing and just see if you're winning more customers per month and if the value of those customers are bigger. Now, I'm not getting into like super sophisticated analytics that tie it specific to what you did, but I'm just giving you a good example of, like, you know, if you think about a sales funnel, I'm going to go from backwards to the top. It goes from clients won to how many opportunities you had, to how many SQLs you had, to how many MQLs you had. And
I haven't heard NQL. Can you define that for
MQL
me?
is marketing qualified leads. Those are people who have raised their hand saying they want to hire you. SQLs are people who you've talked to them and you say, yes, I want to pursue them as a deal. Opportunities are, they meet 4 criteria. They have the budget to work with. You're talking to the decision maker, authority. There's a need for your service, and they're looking to make a timely decision. It's an acronym I use called BANT. So budget, authority, need, and timing. And then customers one is simply customers one. And so when you look at those 4 different things, I start with the most important number, which is customers one. I then go to opportunities. I then go to SQLs. I then go to MQLs. Then you might go to like site visitors or impressions, or, you know, like keep on going further up the funnel. But, you know, that's my starting point is, you know, I know next year I want to win 18 new customers. That's my goal. I have one report that I track. I try to keep it as simple as possible. I have a monthly recurring revenue goal and I have a new customer goal. And I'm trying to keep my metrics as simple as I possibly can of just measuring those things. My business right now gets about 6 opportunities a month. And I have about a 58% win rate when I get into a pitch. So a strategic question I'll ask myself is, well, what do I need to do to get to 10 opportunities a month? And I'll say, you know what, I think this is a good idea. This is what I'm going to test. It's not going to be Yellow Page advertising. But and, you know, I'll put that plan together, and I'll put enough budget to gather enough data to, you know, not just jump ship the second, you know, you're like, oh my God, no one clicked on this, and then leave.
Yeah. The fact that you know that you're at 58% instead of 57, that right there says that you're data driven. And I like that. So it's been a great conversation, Jon. We're kind of at that point. Do you want to tell people how they can get in touch with you, where they need to reach out, and if they're interested in your product, how they can talk to you about it?
Absolutely. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post regularly about how to leverage finances to improve service-based businesses. You can also connect with me. You can go to fiscaladvocate.com. I have an ebook that you can download that talks about best practices there as well. And then if you want to reach out to me, my email is jon@fiscaladvocate.com, and I'd love to hear from you.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jon. This has been truly awesome. I really appreciate some of the insights, and I've got some homework to go do.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ryan. It was great being here.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. We'll see you guys next time.